My name's Eddie Solis. It's good to see many of you all here. I've been fortunate to work with and represent TEXPERS on behalf of Hilco Partners, so I wanted to say thank you for that. I took the opportunity to ask to introduce Chairman Anchia because he's a friend and he's so easy to introduce. I want to start out by saying thank you, Mr. Chairman, to you and Jeff Madden, who is the committee clerk for House Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services, for all your accessibility and your professional courtesies. It's been amazing to work with you all. If you all don't know Chairman Anchia, Rafael Anchia, he's got a pretty amazing story from the start to today. He is the son of immigrants from Spain and Mexico. He started his public service career as a two-term Dallas Independent School District trustee. He has been on the House Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services Committee before. He's in his 9th term in the House of Representatives. He is chairman of the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus. He is probably one of the most formidable intellectual and political members that is in the House and at the Capitol, and has been for a while. As an example of the work that he does for his own party and across the aisle, in early March, he and Vice Chairman Tan Parker stood together and brought the attention of the Capitol, the people in Texas, and really around the country as to sanctions that would should be considered towards Russia. That was pretty impressive. That received national attention, and it was a bipartisan group. Again, Tan Parker, Chair Angie Chen Button, and various colleagues of Chairman Anchia's in his own caucus. His parents were hardworking individuals, as most of ours were. His mother is fortunate to be benefiting from a defined benefit plan. He and I were talking, and his father is in a 401k plan, and we're kind of journey around that a little bit, but in this discussion that he has with Art. But finally, I think probably his crowning achievement is the father of two wonderful young ladies, Sophia and Maya. And so thank you for letting me introduce you, Mr. Chairman. Art, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you. Likewise. Thank you, Eddie. So in order to set the stage for our conversation, Chairman Anchia, why don't you tell us a little bit about the committee that you chair?
All right. So I chair the Pensions, Investments, and Financial Services Committee. And thanks, Art, for inviting me today. It's good. That was a really nice introduction by Eddie. I'm sure to disappoint after that, and I'm going to try really hard to do so. I'm glad Eddie brought up sort of the family background, because it's really important to note that I come at my chairmanships of pension, investments, and financial services, which is a big jurisdiction in the legislature, from the position of a father of a public school teacher, the son of a public school teacher, and the son of two parents who live on my mother's retirement benefit from having been a 35-year veteran public school teacher, right? My father never made more than $25,500 a year during his entire career, so you can get a sense of what his 401k looks like. It's not very robust. However, my mother is able to take care of both of them, and they're in, 85 and 78, and they live an austere but good retirement, dignified retirement, as a result of their defined benefit plan. So I always mention that to people, because that is one of the filters through which I see my charge as chairman of the committee, is through the lens of the annuitants themselves. And then I also, in my private life, I'm a real estate investor, so I also see it through the eyes of the plans needing to achieve certain returns for their annuitants. And like I said, our jurisdiction's pretty big. We have the entire banking industry, so we have oversight over the banking commissioner, the savings and mortgage lending commissioner, the office of consumer credit commissioner. We also have ERS, TRS, the alphabet soup of state pension plans. And then finally, when it comes to investments themselves, if they're new, emerging investments, we take a look at those, try to get the committee and the legislature smart on those issues. I believe I have a slide here that details the members of the committee. So in the introduction, Eddie was nice enough to point out our Vice Chair, Tan Parker. Tan is, we are demoting him to the Senate. It looks like he is going to win. He's going to win that Senate seat, and he and I have had some really nice bipartisan collaboration over the years. Tan has chaired a lot of committees as well, and I imagine our working relationship on the same subject matter is going to continue. He's up from North Texas, and you can kind of see the heat map in the corner where the membership is from, mainly North Texas and Houston, right? And then we have our representative from the Rio Grande Valley, Sergio Munoz, but there's a heavy concentration in the North Texas and Houston areas. But a big jurisdiction and a concentration of members from those places. All right.
Thank you. So given that you have pretty broad jurisdiction in your committee, what type of bills get referred to you in the pension, investment, and financial services?
So given our broad mandate, you can get a sense that we get a lot of bill volume, right? And so in a given session, I've been on committees that I've chaired that have gotten 14 bills, 17 bills, 20 bills. We got 130 bills last session. So it requires the chair and the members of the committee to be collaborative and think about what we actually want to tackle and take on. And when you look at the different buckets that we have jurisdiction over, overwhelmingly the bills that get filed from the members, and not just the members of the committee, but the entirety of the membership of the legislature, over half of the bills that get referred to us are in the retirement systems bucket. Sometimes members care about the state retirement systems. Other times they have issues with local retirement systems. And you'll recall most recently, and this was in between my vice chairmanship of the committee and my chairmanship, but we had a pretty robust discussion about pension funds in both Dallas and Houston, and the legislature. Well, I don't know if you listen to sports radio, they had some hot sports opinions about both not too long ago, and continue to do so. So most of the volume that we get is in that bucket. For investments in financial services, almost evenly split, 27% and 22%.
So given that you mentioned you have so many bills related to retirement systems, can you give us a sense of the pension-related bills that you saw last session?
Yeah, so this is all publicly available. You can go back and look at these bills, but as the chair of the committee, not only do I hear on a daily basis from the members of the committee, but the entire membership. As they're working their bills, they'll come by my desk on the House floor and they'll say, "Hey, Representative, I have the best idea on XYZ," or "I know how we can solve the unfunded liability in XYZ pension fund, and I'm going to have a bill on that." And so I just wanted to highlight a couple of the bills that we saw in the committee, including some by members of the committee, so you can get a sense of the diversity of thought that we have in the legislature on what issues we should be working on. And the first one was by Representative Stevenson, member of the committee from down in the Houston area. He was very interested in creating a revenue enhancement model, which was the purchase of life insurance policies on annuitants. It's a concept you've probably heard of in the past, but that would allow for a waterfall of funding upon, even though it was said to be mortality neutral, a waterfall of funding based on that life insurance policy that would go into the plan and generate revenue to offset some of the unfunded liabilities. That bill ultimately did not get a hearing. I chose not to hear that bill, but we did try to socialize the concept among policymakers and regulators, our state investment plans. And this is just to give you a sense of where some members are on defined benefit plans, their focus on unfunded liabilities, and their search for solutions, whether it's through an insurance product or otherwise, to try to solve some of those unfunded liabilities. We have a broad representation of members who just don't like defined benefit plans, and that was sort of highlighted by Representative Gates, also from the Houston area, not a member of the committee. He wanted all new members in ERS to just go to a defined contribution plan, DC plan. And I would say that that is not an uncommon reaction that you hear from certain corners of the legislature. There are people who just are hostile to defined benefit plans, would much prefer what they might term as market solutions in a defined contribution plan. That bill also did not get a hearing in our committee, but is representative of a certain segment of our constituency. And all of you know there are 150 of us, right? In a state of 30 million, there are 150 of us who serve in the House. Let's see, a prize for anybody. How many members of the Senate? Anybody? And you could, yes. Brilliant. You get a silver dollar and a Mars bar, payable in 2027, when our state pension plans are actuarially sound. We'll see. We'll see about all that. But yes, there are 31 in the Senate, so 181 members of the legislature try to achieve, some level of consensus on these issues. And the last bill I wanted to highlight by Representative Parker, our vice chair, came through our committee, was passed out of our committee, was to create this blockchain group. And I sat in some of the sessions yesterday where sort of blockchain and cryptocurrency were being discussed. I know it's an asset class that many of you are maybe looking at, many of you may be personally invested. It is something that the legislature has not done much on. So this 16-member working group has already been named. It will be convened over the interim, and they will issue a report to the legislature to establish best practices on how our pension fund should be approaching cryptocurrencies, alternative asset classes like that, and blockchain generally, right? So I just wanted to highlight those things to give you a sense of, hey, where people come from in the legislature. I kind of told you based on my life experience how I view these issues, but it is simply one perspective out of many in the legislature that I sought to highlight through the bills that we considered last session.
So those are some of the bills you saw. Can you mention some of the notable pension-related bills that actually passed this session?
Right, so let's start, and I know you're less concerned about statewide plans, but Senator Huffman and Appropriations Chair Bonin got together and created a new class for ERS membership. It was, I don't know, maybe a little controversial. Did not come through our committee, interestingly enough. This bill went through the Appropriations Committee because there was a big chunk of state budget associated with the creation of this new class. And the thought was proponents of this bill would likely say that the Tier 3 class was not achieving its goals of recruitment or retention, and they wanted to create a hybrid model based on TMRS that would have more holding power over employees and actually serve as a better model on a go-forward basis for ERS. That bill ultimately passed, largely on partisan lines, but it passed the legislature. And the other one I wanted to highlight was the FSRP bill, and that was a bill that was a byproduct of a report that had been done by the PRB. It was delivered to the legislature and work among legislators to try to achieve a couple of different things. One is to sort of bring down the trigger for an FSRP, right? So you have during the grace period that we established from 2021 to 2025, if there are 3 consecutive valuations that show that your amortization period is in excess of 40 years initially or in excess of 30 years, and you have a funded ratio of under 65%, you have an FSRP trigger. So we changed the trigger establish this grace period. And then finally, one of the frustrations that was communicated to us in testimony and in meetings was from plans that their sponsors were not meeting with them, right? It was difficult for them to comply because sometimes sponsors were resistant in getting together. And so we wanted to solve that. And other times I would hear from cities that say, hey, our plans are resistant to try to come to some agreement. So what we were trying to do with this bill is force a little bit more dialogue and require plans and governmental sponsors to actually get on the same page and establish a plan to get below that, or to get near that 30-year amortization schedule. Because ultimately, when, as legislators, we sit there and you have plans that are pointing this way and you have plan sponsors, governmental entities that are pointing that way, that gets confusing for us at times. So one of the goals of the SRP bill was to drive that type of discussion between plans and sponsors. So I wanted to highlight these two as being the bigger ones that we dealt with during the last session.
Thank you. The pension systems in the room and TEXPERS, we follow what happens at the legislature closely.
I imagine.
And we noticed recently that your committee just received charges from the Speaker of the House. Can you share with us a little about what you're going to do, what you're going to be working on?
No, I appreciate the question. And when you talk about the interim, right, everybody knows that legislators are in session from January to the end of May. In every odd-numbered year. Then the even-numbered years are election years, and then we do it again. The work doesn't stop after the session. This was a particularly difficult session, the last one we had, not only in its subject matter, but in that it lasted for 9 months, essentially. We were in session. I remember looking at the calendar, and at one point, and this was before the fourth called special session, I looked at the calendar, I said, gosh, we've been in session for all but 6 weeks of 2021. And that's very difficult on a whole bunch of different levels, including the fact that when I go back to my paying job, my colleagues are like, hey, that's really cute, that public service that you do. That's precious. Thank you for doing what you do, but you've got a lot of time to make up, and you've got projects to do, and you've got to deliver for our business. Thankfully, I'm a co-founder of our business. But our 42 teammates require my presence and active participation. So in between serving for those 9 months and the election cycles, we're going to be doing what are called interim charges. These charges are given to us by the Speaker of the House Phelan, who's from kind of the Golden Triangle area, Beaumont, Port Arthur. He says, okay, Rafael, I want you to work on the following issues. And one of the issues is going to be the rulemaking regarding FSRP. I know that we are amidst the notice and comment period. I know if PRB is receiving comments on FSRP from plans throughout the state. They're going to be putting that together in a report that will also be delivered to policymakers, probably at the late spring, early summer, and then they're going to have a vote on those things. I think in the middle of the summer. And so what we're doing is we're monitoring, and we'll have hearings on this, monitoring that process, making sure that stakeholder input is robust, make sure that it is included as part of the process, and then we're going to see the outcome. We will be delivering a report on that process to the legislature and making recommendations on bill filings. So we'll be able to kind of look and see what the rulemaking looks like, see if it's achieving a fair balance. We're going to hear back from you all, and then we will be making recommendations in our interim report back to the legislature, and then it's possible that you'd see additional bill activity based on the outcomes of the rulemaking. Actuarial soundness continues to be a top-of-mind priority for our committee, and we're going to look at a lot of the state plans. So you've got ERS and TRS. You know that LICOS is essentially our prison guards and custodians in the TDCJ system, and then JRS are our justices and judges. We need to make sure that we stay on top of those plans and they're hitting their numbers. And as Eddie said earlier, reviewing investments related to Russia, not necessarily in Russia, but related to Russia. Texas is the 9th largest economy in the world. Our economy is bigger than Mexico's, bigger than South Korea's, bigger than Australia's, and bigger than Russia's. And we have a role to play in supporting democracy around the world, and this was a broad bipartisan effort, right? You had Republicans and Democrats, a supermajority of the House of Representatives and on the Senate side said, hey, we want to examine our pension fund system and exact as much punishment as we can on Russia for their attack on a democratic neighbor. And because our economy is so large, we can play an important role and make them feel a certain amount of pain. So we're going to be focusing on that. Our initial assessment of the state plans shows that we have about $660 million worth of investments. Material, not huge. And one of the things that the interim charge said is, we want you to look and see, we want you to evaluate each asset, look at liquidity, look at sort of penalties for exiting that asset, because we don't want this requirement. We want Russia to feel pain, but we don't want our annuitants or our funds to feel pain at the same time. So we want to have a reasonable approach on unwinding these investments. And so to the extent any of you have this type of exposure, let us know. I think it's better to find out beforehand and understand the nature of the investment, the relative liquidity in the investment. Is it easy to get in and out of? And then establish some sort of amortization plan to get out of that investment in a time certain, assuming that there's no negative ramification or there's no material negative ramification for annuitants or the plan. So just have that on your radar screen. And then finally, and I know nobody really cares about this issue, but reviewing TELFRA governance, there's nobody in here that really cares, right? That we're going to be working on this. I didn't think so. So that's going to be an area of focus. It's come from the speaker to us. So this is a place where I think all of you should be weighing in if you're a TELFRA plan. We're going into this with a completely open mind. I don't think many of the members of the committee understand TELFRA plans or governance. So the hearings that we will be having during the interim on TELFRA will be fact-finding exclusively and trying to understand if there needs to be an update of that statute originally passed in the 30s and to see if the governance in fact is working. But stay tuned on that. Please, the earlier the better, right? And I'll just give you kind of the legislative calendar and suggest to you the best way to engage as stakeholders. We just got through the primary. Many people will have, will be focused now on interim hearings in April and May, maybe June, and then July and August, activity really slows down. And then in September, election season picks up again for the general election. So after Labor Day and until early November on election day, it's really hard to get people's attention, right? So as you're thinking about how to engage, how to reach out to members of the committee, to me as chair, pick those windows as optimal. And I'm happy to give you as much time as you need. I'm happy to hop on a Zoom with our team and do as much learning about your plan as we need to do in this process. And then we will also be having our public hearing. We don't have a date on that yet, but we will make sure we notice it to all TELFRA plans before we do it so we can get the best information available. Sorry.
Thank you. Any insight into what the legislature is thinking that may interest our members?
So there are a couple things that get on legislators' radar screen, and these are even legislators who may have only a cursory understanding of pension plans, right? And that is when they see non-compliance on MET, sort of the basic educational standards, and I would say that makes legislators grumpy, right? When they see sort of a non-compliance rate in terms of training of about 20%. We consider that material. That's a material number, right? And so we want, one of the things we'd love for compliance to be 100% and 100% voluntary. That would be great. We consider MET as part of one's fiduciary duty. In fact, a speaker yesterday said education is part of one's fiduciary duty. But when you see a sort of a 20% non-compliance rate, we want to figure out how to get that up, how to improve that. So that's an issue that I hear bubbling up from policymakers and also from regulators generally, was watching this, say, hey, are we doing, and again, these are minimum standards. It's, I believe, 7 hours in the first year and then 4 hours every 2 years afterwards. As legislators, we kind of look at that and say, hey, that should be a chip shot. Come on, guys. And we have a couple plans that have a 0% compliance rate. We've got 15 plans that have a below 50% compliance rate on MET. That stuff, it gets on our radar screen, and we'd prefer not to have to deal with it. Let me just say that. And then the second thing that I'd like to highlight, and this has been around really even since I was vice chair of this committee under Vicki Truitt back in, gosh, I think 2011 session, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and that is for smaller plans. Again, you hear this bubble up on a regular basis because legislators oftentimes are thinking of efficiencies. They're like, well, what happens for these small plans that may have AUM of $800,000? You know, there are quite a few plans, and the PRB did a study on this in 2018, I believe, and they looked at every plan, and I'm going to get this wrong, but under 14 million, maybe it was 12 million AUM, but in that range. And they said, what kind of efficiencies might we be able to achieve that would be accretive to annuitants, right? And one of the things that they recommended is taking these small plans, pooling them, and then they did 2 levels of analysis. One was an investment management analysis. One was investment management fees plus administration. And could you achieve increases in returns? Could you have helped the corpus of the fund? And again, I've looked at the executive summary on this, and it's my recollection, it was about a 30%. There were about 100 funds, so it was about a 30% improvement if there were pooling of these funds. Super controversial. I get it. Like that, I'm sure that doesn't give a lot of people warm fuzzies, but what I'm trying to do is just highlight some of the things that are bubbling up in the background over here, pull the curtain back on the legislature, and let you know that this is an issue that at least some folks are looking at. So this pooling of funds, you know, it was first proposed in 2018, but it's been around for a long time. I don't know that we'll do anything with it, but people are talking about it. And then the other one, obviously, I know we're running short of time, is the MET. We'd love, during the next report that we get from the PRB, to see like market improvement with MET, and then we can just forget about this issue, or at least not focus on it. And that's, you know, I know we've got about 2 minutes left, Art, but I'm kind of out of material.
Let's open it up to the floor. I'm sure y'all have some questions. Paul?
Good to see you, Paul. And I think we've got a mic coming your way, Paul.
First, thank you to you and your staff. The work that you do during the session is greatly appreciated. I can say from experience working with you, your door has always been open. You've always been open for discussion, whether we agree or disagree, but you've always took the time to sit down and try to resolve the issues, all right, wherever the chips fell. So again, I want to thank you for that and your staff for the work that you do working with us. Now, having said that, and you alluded to this earlier, we've seen pension reform over past sessions. Now, even though it's not on an interim charge on either the House or the Senate side, is there any talk that we may see pension reform next session?
I can assure you that there will be bills filed related to pension reform. We see those, Paul, every session, right? That is the one constant. I'd like to continue in this capacity. Who knows what the composition of the committee will look like? Always up to the Speaker of the House. And I will say this. You know, there was a point late in the session when we were working on kind of this classification system. And I'd gotten enough feedback from you guys, from Eddie, from Art, and your membership. We were getting close to the end. I said, guys, look, I'm just going to put my pencils down on this one, right? Those were my exact words. I say, well, we can deal with this, in a subsequent session, or in the interim, or not. And that's one of the things I appreciated about our dialogue, that, hey, we might have a different approach on this, but, this is not worth dying on one sword, falling on one sword over. I suspect, depending on what the composition of the legislature is, who is in the chair, that there will be bills, there will be meat for people to chew on. Is it a high priority? I think after doing ERS Class 4 or Tier 4, there will be less of a desire to do so. Now, all bets are off if there's some nasty headlines, because you know how the legislature works. If there are headlines out of any corner of the state, and pension funds are in trouble or fraud or whatever, and I know that rarely happens, but conflicts of interest, inside dealing, all that stuff, then members get really anxious and want to do something about it. But I would say in the grand scheme of things, this is probably midway in terms of importance next session.
I think that's all the time we have. Join me in thanking Chairman Rafael Anchia for being with us.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you.